good evening. We're going to wait just a minute for people to come into the webinar. So we'll begin in just a moment. All right, welcome everyone. Well, I'm sure the people will be coming into the webinar as we begin, but we are recording this webinar, so we'll be able to post it for anybody who came in a bit late or wasn't able to make this slightly early time for a parent ed. I know that 6 o'clock can be a hard time to make for a lot of folks. But tonight I am so excited because we are going to be going over our transition to hybrid. And I am very happy to say that we do have an official start date. It just came out today, and we are going to be starting officially in our hybrid schedule on Tuesday. So for students in cohort A, they will be coming live back to school on Tuesday, and then cohort B students will come in for the first time live on Wednesday. So we've been waiting a long time for this announcement, almost exactly a year since we closed down our schools last March 13th. And so very excited to finally get to this point. It feels like it's been a long time coming. And I feel like we are very prepared and certainly very excited to have the students back on campus. So I will be discussing that, the reopening metrics, along with a number of other topics that you can see on the screen tonight. I'll be touching on minimizing risks, some of the things that we are doing around campus. There have been some other parent eds and webinars where I've talked about this in a lot more detail, but I do want to touch on some of the highlights to make sure everybody is aware. We're going to talk about the schedule. What does that schedule look like? What's that all about? Many of you may have watched a webinar in December about the schedule, but that was a long time ago. And if you're anything like me, that got tabled until it was right in front of you. And so now it is indeed right in front of us, and it will be my pleasure to go over that in more detail for you all. We're going to talk about changing instructional strategies. Our teachers have been working very hard this week during their professional development time to really figure out how to retool their classroom for a hybrid environment. It is a little more complicated than it might seem, and I'd love to paint a picture for you of just exactly what this involves. And then lastly, I'd like to touch on some basics with athletics, because our school opening guidelines and the athletic guidelines, they are not the same guidelines. And so there may be some confusion for folks seeing certain things happening in the athletic world that are not happening in the academic world. And some of you may be scratching your heads and wondering why. I am also scratching my head about that a bit, but I do have some of those answers for you, and I'll be happy to share them with you this evening. So just to norm us for this evening, I have opened up for Q&A. And since I am the only one hosting this webinar tonight, what I'll do is I'll go through each of these topics in chunks. And then at the end of each chunk, I will look at the questions that are coming up in the webinar, and I'll review those live for folks so I can make sure that I really get all of you an answer to those burning questions. I've anticipated a few questions that I'll review as part of my presentation based on emails and conversations that I've had with families and students and teachers about some of the things that are coming up that might be a little bit confusing. So hopefully I'll catch some of those really main questions as a part of this presentation, but what I don't get to, please don't hesitate to put into the Q&A feature, and I will get to those at the end of each little chunk that we review. So tonight is really about giving you the most important streamlined things that you need going into the transition into hybrid. I do want to take a quick moment to adjust my screen here for you. and point out that on our district website, there are a lot of very, very detailed pieces of information. Now, some folks like a lot of details and those make you feel comfortable. Other folks would prefer to have a lot of those details taken out of the presentation. But I think that we have something that can meet everyone's needs. So if you go to our district website, you cannot miss the transition to in-person learning and COVID-19 safety information. If you go to that part of the website, it brings you up to a page that has a lot of in-depth information, including all the district communications and updates that you may have been receiving in your email, some different information about our learning models, and just all of the things that you might need to know about safety protocols and procedures, how we're providing student support, how we're assisting with technology, and lots of other additional resources to guidelines and other things that have been coming down through the last few months. So if there's any point in this presentation where you'd really like to dig in more, I guarantee you can find it here. So I wanted to make sure everybody knew that this resource existed. So transitioning back to our presentation for this evening. Most of what I am going to talk about, again, is posted on that page that I just showed you. We're going to start with metrics. And some of you may have been checking this frequently. This was a dashboard put together by our district office showing us day-to-day information about where we were in terms of the tiers, because we have been told that we cannot open for 7th through 12th grades until we are in the red tier. So we have been eagerly tracking the metrics on this over the last couple months, watching those numbers change every day, waiting for that midday report so that we can update our information and get that information out to all of you. Just today, a very important piece was adjusted. So if you look at this dashboard right here for our Contra Costa County tier metrics, you see the cases per 100,000, the testing positivity rate, and the equity metric. And for a long time, these were the three metrics that were being used to determine what tier a different county would be in. And so you can see here that right now our cases per 100,000 are at 8.3. They've been ticking down quite a bit. Our testing positivity rate is 2.5%, and we have a 4.3% equity metric. The equity metric involves looking at the lowest quartile in each area and making comparisons across different regional parts of a county and coming up with a metric to look at the difference between those. Well, you can see that we've been in the orange criteria for testing positivity rate and the equity metric beyond what we need to be, beyond that red tier and into the orange tier. We've actually been sitting here for quite some time. What we've been waiting on is this particular number right here. Now you can see that this says purple criteria met. And indeed, the official number for cases per 100,000 is 7 or fewer new cases per 100,000 residents per day. But recently, as vaccine rates have increased, and as we have been seeing changes within the populations in our counties, there are some ways which one can accelerate through the purple tier and get to the next tier a bit sooner. And indeed, we have hit that acceleration point. Now, I cannot explain to you all the math behind the equity accelerator that was a big part of why we were able to move into the red tier despite posting these numbers. But what I can tell you is that based on the new metrics that have been coming out, they are accelerating us. This weekend, we'll be hitting red tier data and therefore officially cleared to open our schools on Tuesday. If all of that sounded really confusing, you're in good company. It is indeed very confusing to understand. Everything keeps changing, but like I said, we're officially open on Tuesday for in-person instruction. And this involves a combination of an equity accelerator, vaccine percentages in Contra Costa County, and a school waiver that we've applied to that has been moving through our state government. So we're going to be beginning our hybrid schedule next week. So what we're really about coming back to school is maximizing the connection while minimizing the risk. And so we have been designing safety protocols really around this. And you can see there's a real layered approach to this. Not only are we doing nightly cleaning and sanitation of all spaces, but your children, as they come into the spaces, will be sanitizing and cleaning their individual work areas as they come in and as they leave each space each time they enter into a new classroom. As we've been walking students through the tours, we've been modeling that for them. And this has also been embedded within their Canvas course that they've been completing, so they have good models to follow. We'll be practicing distancing protocols in classrooms and at lunch. That means 6 feet of distance. That is the guidance that we are following at our schools. And so, yes, we will be chasing children around, reminding them to spread apart at lunchtime, reminding them to spread apart in the hallways. And some of our hallways are designed with arrows designating the proper way to walk down the hallway. That's all part of our design for helping to facilitate that distancing that we want students to have when they're in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Students will be masking at all times except when eating lunch. And we will be having our students come in daily doing their daily health screenings. Our teachers do these also. All staff and all students on campus are doing these every single day. Our kids did a great job coming in for tours, having those screenings all ready to go. It's very simple to sign up for, and they get a text notification in the morning to remind them to do that. It's really important that they screen honestly for symptoms, and I'll get to a little bit more detail about what will happen in just a moment if they screen with a symptom. We'll be conducting contact tracing. If there are any reported cases or exposures, that will be done by our school and district staff. And we're also encouraging, but not requiring, community testing. So you may have received emails notifying you of community testing available at our school sites. We're going to continue to do that because all of these practices together, I'm sharing with you the multiple layers to improve success. This is a great visual that just sort of shows you how using all of these different layers together could really minimize the risk of exposure for our students and our staff. And many of these layers are things that we are employing at our school sites. So in terms of exposure, there are details on the website about our decision trees. They're also embedded within the student Canvas course so that they can view those. But here's the quick summary. If a student or staff member screens symptoms, we use the decision tree to determine what happens next. But the bottom line is the classroom remains open and there will be no communication sent. We don't consider screening symptoms something that requires communication. What will happen is when a student goes in and they say, gosh, I'm not feeling well this morning, I've got a sore throat, you'll be advised to stay home, and you'll be getting a phone call from district staff to just confirm that the student is okay and then give some guidance on next steps. Meanwhile, the student will be allowed to Zoom into the classroom that day so that they will not miss instruction as long as they're feeling well enough to participate. If students are genuinely sick, they should take the day off and take care of themselves to feel better. If a student or staff member reports a close contact with a confirmed case, that's another question in that screening, then we're going to recommend quarantine for 10 days. That's what's recommended by the CDC. And we'll recommend also COVID testing, and the classroom, again, will remain open. This is just if they've reported close contact. Now, if we end up hearing that a student or staff member has a confirmed case, again, there's quarantining from the onset of symptoms or the testing date, and close contacts are identified. This is where that contact tracing part really kicks in. Teachers will be having seating charts in their classroom. So if there is a confirmed case, we're going to be able to reach out directly to folks that we think may have been impacted. We'll also recommend testing to all of those close contacts. We'll be disinfecting and cleaning the classroom and spaces. The school will be open, but there'll be a community notification deployed. So I'm bringing all this to your attention because you may receive over the next few months a notification of a case here on campus. And this is the process through which we go through if there are indeed cases. So it feels a little scary and overwhelming, but I am really happy to report that our athletic teams have been open for a long time with very minimal exposure and really, really great health outcomes. So we're hoping for that same thing to happen with all of our school protocols as we invite our students back. So a couple FAQs that I anticipated before I just call out for questions. So a lot of people are asking, how are you going to keep students distanced at lunch and in the bathrooms? So we do have additional supervision during lunch for students. We will have a lot of different folks out there. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, but when you think about the math of the number of kids that are going to be out at lunch at any given time, and you calculate in the fact that we have half the students on any given day and 2 lunch periods each of those days, we're talking about approximately 300 students. Now, I don't mean to brag, but supervising 300 students is something I feel very confident in. With our extra staff out there, we'll be able to remind students kindly if they're getting a little close, reminding them to put on their masks after they have finished eating. We also have marked areas all around campus where students can sit, so we're making it very visually apparent where things are good and where places are that students should not be. One of the bigger challenges is that we're limited on the number of students who can sit at a picnic table, which sounds a little bit crazy, but we are encouraging students to be creative, and they can bring blankets or even chairs if they like out to lunch. And we're looking to make that to be a really positive experience. Lunches when kids are with each other and they really enjoy that time. We want to make it really positive while keeping our students safe. In terms of bathrooms, there's maximums on the bathroom, and we've modeled some protocols. Yes, I modeled for students how they should use the restrooms at school. And so we will be using those protocols to make sure that we don't have more than the maximum number of people in the bathroom at any given time. A lot of people wondering what happens if my student is sick. So I reviewed this briefly before, but be honest on your screening. You'll be contacted to give some recommendations, and students who have screened with symptoms will still be able to attend class over Zoom on those days. How about a teacher? Teachers can get sick too, and they're going to have a similar protocol. If the teacher is sick or has some symptoms but still is well enough to teach, the teacher might stay home and Zoom into the classroom. We'll have a supervisor assigned to that space to facilitate the technology, and the teacher will teach the whole class through Zoom. And this is another question that's come up. Are we required to quarantine if we go out of town? And the answer is no. Currently, there are no quarantine restrictions for travel. And we do expect students and families to engage in activities that minimize risk while they're out of school, but there's no requirement to quarantine after you come back from being out of town. We know that behaviors are the #1 factor in minimizing risk. So our behaviors can be risky just being right here, depending on how we are engaging with the public. So we're asking people to use those really safe habits as they are out and about. And if folks do go out of town, we do have the community testing available that folks can definitely opt into doing, just to have that extra reassurance. And are you required to get tested? No, you are not required to be tested. There is guidance that encourages schools to do community asymptomatic testing, but we're not requiring that for our students. We are offering the weekly community testing to all community members and encouraging people to use that. And no, you will not be charged for that testing. There's a lot of confusion out there about that, but we've been able to code that properly and make sure that you're not going to get charged for that. So at this point, I'm going to turn to the questions. And I received a question around the teachers receiving the vaccine. Great news on this. Many of our teachers have received the vaccine. Many of them over this week and next week will be receiving their 2nd dose, in fact. And so I don't have exact percentages, but the vast majority of our teachers have been vaccinated, and we have had that available to us as educators, which has been incredible. So people are very excited about that, and it's making our staff feel really good about being back at school. I should mention that's not just teachers, it's other school staff as well. So the majority of your personnel have indeed been vaccinated. We're not requiring the students to, the question is, how come we aren't requiring the kids to be tested regularly? We have a lot of students, so getting through that many students in an efficient way is really challenging. We do believe, based on what we've seen with athletics, that our protocols are working really well and that we can maintain an environment that minimizes risk without that much testing. It takes a lot of time to do that, and if we're using instructional time here at school to test our students, it's taking away from their ability to really engage in the classroom. So that decision was made for now not to do that weekly testing for our students, but those things could change if we find that it's something that we need to add in. Oh yes, great question. The school will indeed be offering free lunch. We have free lunch for all of our students every single day. So they'll be able to walk through our cafeteria and obtain a free lunch. For community members who have been coming to get the lunches that we've been provided, the windows for pickup are going to change a bit, but we'll still be providing community meals as well. Okay, next question is, when A students are in person or AC students doing, okay, so this question I'm gonna hold on for just a minute because I'll get to that one when I talk about instruction. So don't worry, I'm gonna get to some details about what the cohorts are doing. And the last question here is, what is the current expected turnaround for the testing provider? I've been getting my testing back that I do weekly as a staff member within a couple of days. So that turnaround has gotten quicker in my experience. And so I'm hoping that families are seeing that with our community testing as well. We're also looking to obtain some rapid tests for our athletes who need to test a bit more frequently right now. And I should be specific and say that's not all athletes, but certain sports are required to do that so that we have a very short turnaround time for those folks. There's a question about athletics, and I am going to get to that a bit later, so I'll hold on that. To clarify on lunch, yes, they can absolutely bring their own lunch. Great question here about pickup and drop off. Traffic wise, do we anticipate traffic? I'm sure we'll see an uptick, but it is important to note that only half of our students are coming at any given time. So I don't expect that to look quite the same as traffic would look for us on a normal traditional schedule. But Tuesday will be my first adventure through this as well. The pickup and drop off process here at Miramonte will remain the same. Parents dropping off will come through the bus circle and be able to drop off their child at the curb and then circle back around to exit our campus area. We are able to provide more parking passes this year because, again, only half the students are here at any given time. So we've opened up parking permits, to our sophomores who we don't traditionally have enough space for. So I'm hoping that that will help facilitate some easier commutes to school and get more kids parked. Students will be able to eat with their friends. They'll be able to eat as long as they're distanced 6 feet apart, wherever they would like to eat. And if students are dropped off early, our library will be open. It's spaced out, allowing for students to sit 6 feet apart in a quiet study space. There is not full occupancy, obviously, during this time, but there are approximately 25 seats there. So if students come early, they should check out the library as a place to sit first. If it looks like we have a lot of students needing space, we can open up some other spaces around campus. If students have issues with their laptops on campus, they can go to the library. Stephen Salkaitis has an office in the library and can help them out with that. If the student filled out the form for the parking pass, we've been having students pick that up as they finish their tours. The vast majority of our students have been coming for a tour. If a student was not able to come during their tour time, they'll be able to pick up their pass on their first day on campus. We will not be checking every single car for passes that day as we get organized. And so we'll be sending out notifications to students who did not come through on a tour on how to do that. Yes, students should be screening at home before they go to school. They'll need to show their screening to their first period teacher. All right. Let me just do a little cleanup here and make sure that I got everything. And I'm keeping the ones in that I'm holding for later. Another question about sports. I'm going to keep that in there and I'll get to it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next piece, which is looking at our schedule. So you may already be familiar with the fact that we have two groups. We have cohort A and cohort B. Cohort A will be attending in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and cohort B will be attending in person on Wednesdays and Fridays. On Mondays, both A and B will remain asynchronous, just like they have been over all of our year in distance learning. Mondays will look pretty much exactly the same, where students will be asynchronous. They'll begin their day with Cohort Academy, where we'll take their live attendance for that day. And then they'll be assigned work in each of their classes to work on asynchronously at home. Our schedule is flipping a little bit, so we are used to kind of going every other day with our classes, and now you can see that periods 1 are offered twice a week like they have been offered, but they'll be offered back to back as opposed to every other day. So it's going to change the rhythm a little bit of the class. The reason for this is we want to keep the 2 cohort activities as close together as possible. So by having the students go back to the same classes, the teacher is able to plan for a little bit more continuity between those classes. I want to draw your attention to this lunch block here because it's a bit confusing. So what's going to happen on campus is that lunch 1 will be for all 9th and 10th graders. So all 9th and 10th graders will attend lunch 1. While all of the 9th and 10th graders are out during lunch, our 11th and 12th graders will be in academies. So they'll be in their academies during that time working with their teachers. Then when lunch 2 comes, the 11th and 12th graders will transfer to lunch, and the 9th and 10th graders will transfer to academy. Now, one thing, so great news, every kid will be able to experience academy twice a week while they are live on campus. So if they're coming on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they will have an academy each of those days. If they're coming on Wednesdays and Fridays, they'll have an academy each of those days. One thing that makes this a little more complicated is that our teachers will be having to flip back and forth between these academy periods if they teach students in mixed grade levels. So what this effectively means is not every teacher may be available every academy that a student is on campus. That is confusing. But what I can promise you is every teacher will be available at least one of the 2 academies for your student while they are on campus. Now, the students are going to need to sign up in advance for their academy, and this is included in their Canvas module with instructions for them. This is because our seat counts are limited and not every teacher is available every academy. So they'll have to go in and decide on where they're going to want to be, and I would advise them to do that earlier. The kids know how to do this, and if they're confused, just have them reach out to administration. We will walk them through it. It's going to take a little practice the first couple weeks, but we're going to find everybody a seat and get everybody support. I do want to remind folks that our academy is a lot shorter. It's only 30 minutes. We're used to having almost an hour of academy each day. So this is going to feel really different to our teachers and our students also, because they're not going to have quite as much time to do some of the things that they're used to doing. Now, our teachers and our kids feel like academy is a human right. It's one of the best things that we have to offer here. So this is going to be a tough transition that we're really trying to think about so that we can make sure that we're still offering robust access to our teachers and student support, even with academy being minimized a little bit from what has traditionally been. Now, if your student is on the fully remote schedule, the schedule is just going to look a little bit different. So the thing I want to draw your attention to here is that teachers will be offering office hours during one of these 3 times. They'll make sure to publicize those to the students so that the students will know when those office hours are. And those will be the times where students can drop in and get support from their teacher if they are on a fully remote schedule. Students who are on fully remote will have this whole block as a lunch break. They will not be able to go to academy. Academy, because it's so short, most students will not be zooming into those academies. The teachers will be working with the in-person student during academy and reserving these office hours for support for their distance kids. If you do the math, it comes out the same. So the students will each get an hour of academy a week if they are in person, and the students will each get an hour available with each of their teachers potentially if they're on fully remote. So we do believe that we have enough out there to be able to meet everyone's needs, but that's going to, again, change the rhythm a bit for the fully remote students who aren't going to have the academy embedded in the day, but have it offered at different times for office hours during the week. Okay, so how will Academy run? It's going to be offered daily for in-person students. The 11th and 12th graders have Academy first. The 9th and 10th graders have it second, and the students are going to need to log into Teachmore to sign up in advance for Academy. The fully remote students, like I just mentioned, are going to get their support through the weekly office hours specifically set up for fully remote students, and the teachers will be communicating those times. And then because we're on the topic of cohort, this is a big and important question that's come up from a lot of people. Can I switch cohort? And can I switch from fully remote to in-person or vice versa? So splitting the kids in half is just not fun. We would of course love to have all of our students here together, and we know how stressful it is for students to feel like they are not with their best friends during their cohort. Honestly, we recognize that. That's super stressful for kids, and kids being able to be with their friends is a big part of why we want kids back at school. The issues with our space constraints are real, and so we've had to make this move, as many other schools have done throughout our state and our country. And when we split, we had to be very mindful of classroom maximums. So each of our classrooms has a slightly different maximum, so this becomes a very complex formula of trying to figure out how to balance everything out in every individual schedule so that a student has a safe seat in every class period. We did not want to change any student schedules because it was loud and clear from both students and staff that they did not want to have schedule changes in the middle of the year. And so in order to do that, students have been put on a cohort and seats have been arranged to make sure that there's enough seats for them. The issue we're coming up on now is we rarely can change a student even if we want to, because there's not room in one of their classes on the other side of the cohort. And so we just don't have a seat for them. We're trying our very best to accommodate families, but please just know that there are some real restrictions on seat availability that make this incredibly challenging. Now, students will have a 2-week window in which they could switch from fully remote or in-person to in-person or vice versa, because we know that families might need a couple weeks to wrap their head around what's happening. So we'll be working with families over the next couple weeks to get that feedback, and if folks need to move, we're going to do our best to make that happen for them. After that, we're not going to take any more changes because we'll be well into our quarter and want to keep students as stable as possible. And this is another big question that's come up, and it's a little tricky because our ideas about how school is have really changed over this pandemic. So the question is, if I go out of town, can I join remotely even though I am in person? And the answer is no. So I know that we've gotten really used to being able to use this wonderful, miraculous tool called Zoom to be able to access our classes from wherever we are. But the lessons in a hybrid are being designed very specifically around the in-person and fully distanced students, and switching back and forth is not going to be an option. If students screen with symptoms, they can access the class remotely. That's a temporary situation, and we don't want to discourage folks from screening symptoms. So we want to make sure that those kids still have access, but it's not an option for families choosing to travel. If a student fails to attend more than 4 days in person, they're going to be moved to fully remote because it's going to align better with what's happening for them to make sure that they're not missing on anything going back and forth between the two modes. So I know that this is a little frustrating for some folks, but this is part of kind of renorming, getting back into the in-person structure that is traditional school. All right, now I'm going to turn my attention over to these questions. So pardon me as I look a little bit strange as I'm reading the screen. Okay. When A students are in person, are AC students doing the same thing as B and BC students, or are they doing something different? I'm going to give a partial answer to that, and then I think I'll give you more clarity in the next section. The answer is yes to both. It really depends on the mode of instruction that the teacher is utilizing. So it could be that the teacher is indeed having the students do the same thing in both spaces. Or it could be because of what the teacher is having the students do in person. That doesn't transfer over exactly to a remote situation, and they're providing something else that's slightly different different, but still meets the learning objective for the students who are at home. So we could see some differentiation based on what the instructional needs are for the space. Okay, so a question from the previous topic on safety. Do they show the screening doc on their phone, or does it have to be printed out? So the students can just show the screening on their phone, and that will be just fine. No need to print anything. When will we know what classes the C group is attending? Well, C group students are going to attend their regular schedule. If your student has been assigned AC as their scheduling group, they'll be attending attached to the A cohort. And if your student has been assigned BC, they'll be attending attached to the B cohort. Those students on cohort C just should know that effective Tuesday, they'll be logging into the Zoom room for their teachers just like they have been. And then their teachers will help give them instructions about how things are changing from there. Okay, a carpool question. Can seniors carpool together? The answer is yes. There are lots of reasons why students need to carpool in order to actually get to their activities. What we are asking is that when students carpool, that they do wear masks as they are carpooling, even if you've been podding with that person. I know there's a lot of pods out there, and I think it's great that that's been happening for our kids, but to be extra safe and to make sure that everyone, that when the kids get out of the car, it doesn't look like they've been unmasked in that space. Kids are going to need to wear masks in their carpools. Will in-person students mostly be working online, doing work on their personal PCs despite being in person? No. So the students who are in person will not be in the Zoom room or will be minimally in the Zoom room on their individual computers. The teacher is going to be teaching in a hybrid format, so they'll be teaching live to the kids in the room while Zooming in the kids who are at home. To know if students are AC or BC, there have been some emails sent that outline exactly how to find your scheduling group. If you can't find those in your archives, shoot me an email and I'll send you some instructions on how to do that. The students also went through it in their cohort several weeks ago, so your child might actually know after having gone through that cohort. But if you need extra help, just send me an email and I'll show you how to check that out. How should a student determine which class to sign up to go for their academy? Their favorite, the one with the lower grade, for someone who usually plays video games during academy. Yeah, during academy over distance learning, certainly not everyone has been opting in. It has not been required. During school, we have a bevy of different options open on campus during traditional school. Students really, my recommendation is that students should go to a place where they may need extra help so that they can ask a question. If there's nowhere that they need to go for extra help, they should go somewhere they feel comfortable with, a teacher that they feel good around, that they like, that they feel supported with, so that they are in a space that is comfortable for them. Yes, students can charge their laptop. They may be able to do that in some of the classroom spaces, but it's not guaranteed that they'll have easy accessibility to a plug. And because movement in the classrooms is really challenging to facilitate, we absolutely advise that students come fully charged with laptops each day. That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. Yes, to be clear, students are not told to attend certain academies. They sign up for the academy that they want to go to and teach more. They are required to go to a academy during their academy period. Students find their classroom numbers. We have given some maps to our freshmen earlier in the year, but I can absolutely send that out to them again. It shows where the classrooms are. In terms of the actual classroom numbers, they can find that by logging into Aries. And if you log into your PASS portal, which is located, the link for that is located on the front page of our website, then students can see their schedule with the classroom numbers there? But that is actually another great question because they may not know that. And since they haven't gone to their classes yet, we may need to send that out again if students don't still have their paper schedule from the beginning of the year. Thank you for asking that. Okay, and is the 2-week deadline to change? Yeah, it'll be right before we go on spring break, so the end of the month, and the student should notify their counselor if they want to change, and then we will take it away from there. Okay, I'm going to come back to some of these athletic questions. I'm going to get into the hybrid model. This is where things get real, folks. So the first thing I want to tell everybody is expect change. Even if you are staying on fully remote, this is going to feel very different than distance learning. The format will be different at home and it will be different at school. So I want to take you through a little visual that might help you understand what this is going to look like. So first of all, what's happening in classrooms right now is the teachers are practicing logging into multiple devices into the Zoom room so that they can project and mirror things for students to see in the class and at home. We've supplied every classroom with an iPad on a stand, and when the teacher opens up their Zoom class every day, it's going to look a little like this. The kids will be coming into the classroom and the teachers will be waving to the students and saying hello to the students. And then the teacher will be looking at the Zoom screen and saying hello to the students on Zoom and taking attendance while everybody gathers together. The iPad will be set up so it'll be mirroring the whole classroom. So the students at home will be able to see a visual of what's happening in the classroom space. Kind of cool. The teacher will also be logged on to their computer so they can teach from that space and make eye contact with the students on the screen while also seeing the rest of the students in the classroom. The teacher will then use that computer to mirror things. So things will get mirrored onto the Extron so that students in the classroom can see it, and it will be mirrored on the screen for the Zoom students to see as well. The reason I'm saying this is going to feel different is because the teacher is going to be splitting their time and attention between two audiences, sometimes looking at the kids in the room and giving instruction, and sometimes looking directly at the kids in Zoom and giving instruction there. That means things like the chat feature that we've gotten really used to being able to put questions in and get quick responses for will have a little bit of a delay time for the folks who are at home because the teacher will be dividing time and attention between two different places. It's going to be wild. All right, let me show you a little bit around what a classroom could look like for your student. So this is what teachers have been working on this week. And we really see there as being kind of two different main models that teachers can use as their structure for designing their content. The first one is a flip model. So what would happen in a flip model, let's say on a Tuesday, is that the cohort A live students come in physically to the classroom. They're in the classroom space right here. The teacher is right here at the teacher workstation. And then the students from cohort B who are home that day and our remote students, AC and BC, start logging into the Zoom room. So the teacher greets everybody in the Zoom room. The teacher might do a warm-up or something with everybody all together, and then ask for questions from the kids. And at that point, the teacher might say, okay, for the cohort B students and the cohort BC students, I've got something for you to do at home. You're going to do something asynchronously and work on that while we move through a lesson. And then tomorrow, we're going to do that lesson live. So the teacher might excuse the cohort B and the cohort BC students, the remote students attached to cohort B, and then keep the cohort AC students in the Zoom room so that they can participate along with the cohort A students in what's happening that day. Then the following day, everything would flip. So our cohort B students would come in live. Our cohorts AC and BC are always remote, so they're logging in on Zoom, and our cohort A students are logging in on Zoom also. And then the cohort A folks would be excused to do the work that the cohort B students did the day before. So in that model, you might not see your student in the Zoom all day, every day. They might be excused to do some work asynchronously because the teacher is flipping lessons between the 2 days. That's one way. Another way that this can look is one lesson for two audiences. So cohort A comes in live, teacher's saying hello. Cohort B is logging into the Zoom room along with the fully remote students. And instead of excusing those students, the teacher is perhaps mirroring something that everybody's listening to together. Perhaps she's asking students live to turn and talk to their partners, and she's putting the students in the Zoom and breakout rooms to have conversation. And she's teaching the same lesson to two different audiences. In this case, you might expect your student to stay in the Zoom room for the entire period because they're getting that lesson along with their in-person fellow students on that same day. So hopefully that paints a little bit of an image of what this is going to look like. Our teachers are being infinitely creative and thoughtful about how to design these lessons, and that's really been the focus of our work on this week that we've had. So some FAQs that I've been hearing. How will students be assessed in hybrid? This is like the #1 question coming up by people. Okay. Teachers have been directed to use the same assessment methods for in-person and fully remote students, period. So I'm not sure if you knew this, but the one thing that teachers hate more than anything else is academic dishonesty. So teachers are not looking to give certain students an opportunity to perhaps not have as much integrity as other students. They want to make sure that that experience is equitable for all kids. So you can expect that your child's assessments will look the same, whether they are in person or whether they are fully remote. The mode of that will be the same. The process for taking that test will be the same. Teachers are going to keep that as similar as possible. There are going to be different things happening within the live classroom space, of course, but in terms of those summative assessments, you can expect those to be administered in the same way for both groups. So will my child be Zooming for the full day and their at-home days? Not necessarily. So as I just tried to illustrate for you, in some cases, a teacher may keep all of the students in the Zoom room for the whole period. In other cases, the teacher may release some of those students to do work independently. It really depends on the learning outcome that's trying to be achieved. That really drives the instructional practice that we use. And this is another question that's come up. How will you guarantee that my child has the same experience in fully remote as in person? And here's what I can guarantee. I can guarantee you that our teachers are going to support all of our students to learn and connect at high levels. Absolutely 100%. That is in their center just as much as is it mine and yours. I can't guarantee that that experience will be exactly the same. Teachers are adapting their instructional materials, so there could be some different things that kids do at home versus in person because of some obvious limitations that we might have when kids are at home versus in person. But that doesn't mean that the expectations are going to be different, and we're going to aim for all students to have a very high quality experience. So, questions. I'm going to turn to your questions now. Oh, what is the split of students in school versus still remote? We actually had the most students out of all of our district schools opt into coming in person, which was fantastic. About between 75 and 80% of our students are coming in person. And then the others will be staying fully remote. So it seems like a lot of the remaining questions revolve around athletics, and we have just about 12 minutes left, so just enough time to get to these. So athletics, it's a story of two sets of guidelines. So there's guidelines for school and there's guidelines for athletics, and guess what? They don't match exactly. So if you're scratching your head around why football has already started, but we're still not in the classroom doing geometry, I'm with you. It's been a little bit confusing to keep up with, but the bottom line is our kids are staying engaged. They're getting out there and being active. They're hanging out with their friends and they're wonderful coaches, and that is a good thing all around. So even though I may not fully understand why some of those decisions were made, I am happy for our kids because they are getting a better experience for it. So we have permission to play all sports. Things you should know. Schedules are still being developed for some of the sports, and they should be approved and released soon. So expect girls soccer, boys lacrosse, girls and boys water polo, wrestling, sport cheer, and girls and boys basketball. Oh, and I forgot to put there, girls and boys volleyball will be coming out very soon. We are working on that as we speak. So in our next DAL meeting, we should be able to get many of those approved, and you will be getting that information. Watch for emails from James Lathrop for information about health clearance experiences and signing up for athletics. That is your best source of information. Your coaches are also going to get all this information and be reaching out directly to you. And so look for those emails as we're getting a little bit closer for sports starting, and that will really help guide you in the right direction. If you have any questions, reach out to James Lathrop or myself, and I'll be happy to answer them. Big questions coming up. Can my child play multiple sports? Yes, students can actually play their club and Miramani sports simultaneously. In addition, if a student does want to play more than one Miramani sport at a time, they should email James Lathrop and we'll work with students. Playing more than one sport at a time is actually really challenging just in terms of the logistics and the time, but for some students, it is a must. So we're going to work with those kids and try to make that happen for them. One of the challenges right now is that because we're trying to cram the whole year's worth of athletics into like less than half a year of school, there's a lot of overlap between sports, even with our shortened seasons. And that can be really frustrating for students who love to play multiple sports and are hoping to get out there for a few things. So we want to work with them individually on that. Fully remote students, can they play sports? Yes, fully remote students can participate in all school activities, including athletics. And with that, I am going to turn my attention to the questions. We've had a few people waiting for a while on their sports answers. My apologies. So if a student is on after school sports team, there'll be a place for them to change after school, and can they leave their sports clothes in a locker? Do they have to bring them with them every day? Okay, a few answers in there. First of all, we are going to open the locker rooms after school for about a 15-minute window for students who have sports like immediately after school and need to change their clothes and get to those sports. The locker rooms will not be open all night. And the reason for this is that we really cannot supervise those spaces. And they're also full of furniture, because when I had to move the furniture out of the classrooms to distance our desks, I had to put it somewhere. So it went in the locker rooms. So we don't have a lot of space in those locker rooms, but we do have enough space for those students who aren't going to have time to go home first and need to change their clothes. So yes, they'll be open for students to change their clothes right after school. Same is true for those swimmers who are practicing in the morning and then need to go straight into their classes. We're going to open the locker rooms in the morning for them so that they can change and then go to their classes. There is not going to be a locker access for students. So they will have to bring their things with them every day, which I know can be kind of a drag, but our kids are very creative and sometimes even get people to store them in their classrooms for them. And also they'll be okay. We'll make sure that we get through the day carrying our bags. I have faith in them. And yeah, I'm sorry, we just won't have a place for students to be able to store their gear, so they're going to have to bring it with them during the day. I know, again, that that's really challenging, but we just logistically don't have the space for that or the supervision for that. We'll be working with our coaches to come up with some other ideas. There are, for example, storage sheds for teams that use our stadium field, and it might be possible for students to leave some of their equipment in those spaces and then retrieve them the next day. So we'll be working with them to try to come up with good solutions that help our kids out. But there are going to be some areas where the kids are going to have to do things a little bit differently. The question is, if a student doesn't have a 7th period, is there a break between their last class and the start of their athletic practice start time? Do they have to leave campus or can they stay on campus? They can stay on campus. In fact, our library will be open after school, so they're welcome to find a seat in there if they want to get some homework done. Great question about clubs. What happens with student clubs? Any in-person student club activities happening on campus soon? I hope so. It's a little challenging because a lot of our clubs do meet during lunch, and with the fact that our teachers will be flipping lunch with Academy, those classroom spaces that typically are used for clubs may not be available. So we'll be working with students to try to encourage some club activities on Mondays where they have a little bit more flexible time on their asynchronous day, and working with our teacher advisors on making those opportunities accessible. But I definitely hope our clubs feel like they can get moving. Faraway games for sports will be allowed to use carpools to transport players. Again, we're just asking that folks do wear masks when they're in those carpools. And although spectators for sports will be limited in most facilities here in a way, they will be allowing those folks driving the carpools to come into the facility. You will not be left in your car if you drive a group of kids to a game. Students will not have access to their lockers for storing their lunch and their stuff during school time. So they will have to carry things with them. Our locker culture at Miramonte is actually, not a lot of kids use lockers. So I think most of our students find that that's not too burdensome for them. They shouldn't have to carry too much, but yes, they will have to bring that with them during the day. Oh, great question about PE. Students will not need to change for PE. That's one of the things that we're changing. So I've been advising students while they're on their tours that if they have PE, they should come that day in the clothes that they can do PE in. I don't anticipate that PE will be unduly vigorous for them, but they will not be able to change in the locker rooms. This all could change. We could see that guidance changes and that we are opening up these spaces more, but for the beginning of school, this is how things will be set up. All right, and with that, we're at 6:55. I truly appreciate all of you popping into this meeting. It has been an absolute pleasure. This year has been wild, but it is my absolute honor to be your principal, and I am so excited to have your kids back on campus. So thank you for coming this evening, and go Mats!